Welcome to the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel. I'm Mark Gillespie. Each week on Whiskey Cast, we cover the entire world of whiskeys. But let's be honest, some of the whiskeys we report on are pretty hard for the average whiskey lover to find, either because they're just not widely available, or their prices are astronomically high, or both. This podcast is different. We focus on accessible whiskeys that you should be able to find pretty easily, depending on where you live. And what's more, the people doing the tasting and scoring are regular whiskey lovers just like you. Because we believe that your opinions are just as important as those of the pros who judge in whiskey competitions or write about whiskeys. Or frankly, podcast about them too. This time around, our panelists are members of New Jersey's Monmouth Whisky Club, and later on, I'll tell you how to become one of our panelists for an upcoming episode. We'll meet the panel and get started right after this. Support for the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel podcast comes from the Whiskey Exchange, one of the world's leading whiskey retailers, offering worldwide delivery with a range of more than 9,000 different whiskeys and spirits. The Singh brothers, Sukhinder and Raj, opened the Whiskey Exchange back in 1999 with a simple philosophy: to offer the best whiskeys at competitive prices. You'll find everything from Amrut to Yamazaki on their website, including pretty much every single malt you can think of, and plenty that you can't, including their own single cask bottlings and distillery exclusives from around the world. Voted the 2017 Independent Spirits Retailer of the Year in the IWSC Awards, the Whiskey Exchange is, as the Huffington Post put it, Scotch whiskey's cathedral. If you're visiting London, stop by the shop in Covent Garden or their new location in Fitzrovia. And you can visit them online at thewhiskeyexchange.com, along with Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Let's meet our tasting panel for this episode of the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel. We are live on location with the members of the Monmouth Whisky Club tonight at the Fireside Inn in Marlborough, New Jersey, in a little more north than central New Jersey, just above that I-195 borderline that defines North Jersey from South Jersey. So we've got some guys sitting around the tables here at the Fireside. We have our three panelists up here, and I'm going to introduce each of you and ask you to tell us about your own experiences and how you got into whiskey in the first place. And we will start at the far end of the table with Michael Timpanero.
Hello. Well, whiskey and I go back, I don't know, probably into my youth. I, in my career, have traveled to Europe and worked in England for a while and got myself interested in various whiskeys here. And, of course, had a lot of bourbons over here in the States beforehand, and then realized the difference between real Scotch right there, right where it's made. And I actually been joining it with the club. I jumped in the club fairly early with the more of a eclectic experience and like to try different brandies and whiskeys and things around from all over the place. So this is my chance to do that. It's a fun way to do it.
Okay, thank you for agreeing to be one of our panelists tonight. Glen Fuchs, in the middle of the panel. Tell us about your first experience with whiskey, Glen.
I probably first started with whiskey midway through my college years. My grandmother was a big whiskey drinker for as long as I can remember, and I just wanted to see what was so special about whiskey, and I'm glad I did, because here I am all these years later, I'm still drinking it. I started off mostly with the single malt scotches, and I met a few fellow whiskey lovers, including members in this club. Expanded my palate for some different other whiskeys, and I'm just down to try something new.
What did your grandmother drink?
Glen Fuchs.
That's a cool grandma.
Absolutely.
Rich Romano, our third panelist tonight. Rich, tell us about your first experience with whiskey.
I think I was 14. I tried bourbon. I had quite a few. It was on a New Year's Eve and promptly got sick. But actually, I really got into the whiskeys more in the last, I would say, 4 years. A friend of mine had come over to the house, and I always drank Jack Daniels. That was my go-to. And he comes over and he says, "Oh, you got to try some scotch." I brought a bottle over. I said, "I don't like it." I said, "I never liked scotch. I don't want to drink it." He says, "Oh, have you ever had a single malt?" I said, "No." So it was a cool night. We had a little fireplace going. I said, "All right, let me try it." And that was it. I was hooked from that day.
And you'll notice the tapping is Rich tapping his hand on the table. That happens from time to time. It's okay. We can edit that out. Let's start with our first whiskey, and we are doing the Bond, Bottled in Bond bourbon tasting this time around. We have 3 Bottled in Bond bourbons, and I figured the James Bond reference was better than Bottled in Bondage. Mm-hmm. But it is okay for you guys to make some noise back there. These are the jokes. This is the funny portion of the show. Just we want to prove that there actually is a live audience here, guys. We're going to start with the Henry McKenna 10-year-old single barrel. This is a Bottled in Bond. Of course, I'll just go through the rules for Bottled in Bond. Single distillery, single distilling season. Of course, it has to be distilled in the U.S. The distilling season has to be either January 1st through the end of June, the spring season, or the fall season, which is July 1st through the end of the year. Once again, bottled at 50% ABV under government supervision in a bonded warehouse. And I'm sure there's probably 3 or 4 other requirements that somebody will email me about after this show airs. But we're going to do the Henry McKenna single barrel first. And guys, go ahead and get your noses into the glass and tell us what you think of this one.
It's not too harsh. I don't feel too much of a burn, to be honest, on it.
Yeah. It's actually has a very nice nose. It's almost caramelized.
I was going to say it smells like it's got a caramel apple kind of smell to it.
Okay.
Actually smell like a honey type of
Yeah, a little
scent.
honey in the background.
Anything else coming to mind when you taste it, or nose it rather?
Maybe just a hint of cinnamon.
Okay.
A little bit of the a young oak smell in there. Yeah, that the vanilla-ness coming through. You can get that from the...
Yeah, I do get the vanilla a little bit.
Now, we have told the guys in the audience over here to our left that feel free to disagree with these guys and shout out anything you may have to add. Does anybody have anything that out here that... do you guys disagree, or do you agree with them for the most part?
For the most part, I agree, especially the honey. I absolutely smell honey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're getting some agreement here. While you guys are taking your taste, let me explain the scoring system that we use here on the Whiskey Cast tasting panel. Each judge will nose and taste the whiskeys neat first, then add water to taste, your personal choice. They'll score each whiskey from 0 to 5 points, with half points acceptable. 1 score per whiskey. We're going to one composite score. We don't do a separate score with water and without water. They will not discuss the scores with each other, but they can discuss anything else that they come up with. The idea is to avoid any kind of peer impact on the scores. And then when we're done, we will take the scores, average them up using my rudimentary math skills, and we will come up with a winner for the tasting panel flight this time around. That said, guys, what do we get on the taste for this one? And Michael needed one more taste to...
Oh, of course. It's actually, I think Rich was right. It's fairly smooth. Very little burn there. I get a little bit of that, what we're calling the caramel apple type of taste there as well.
I have a sweet finish to it.
Yeah.
I detect some kind of a sweet finish. I don't know what, honey or some kind of a fragrant finish.
There's no wrong answers here. It's up to you guys. I'm not going to tell you what I get out of it. That's the idea here. Is this is you guys doing the tasting, not me. So, Glenn.
I agree with the smoothness of it. There is a slight bit of a burn, but I only feel it in the mouth and all the way down when it reaches the stomach. There's no burn in between, though. That probably is part of why it's so smooth.
Okay. Any flavors that come to mind?
Vanilla and honey are the two that come through for me.
Okay. Anybody out in the crowd here have any suggestions? Go ahead and shout them out. Smoky. Okay, a little bit of maybe charred oak or like campfire smoke, stuff like that. Anybody else? Well, let's go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, a quiet crowd on us today.
Well, they're contemplating, too. Whiskeys are meant to be savored and contemplated. So let's go ahead and add a few drops of water to your personal preference, and let's see how this one swims and see whether the water makes a difference or not. Since these are higher proof at 50% ABV or 100 proof, it's quite likely that water might open things up just a bit. And go ahead and nose first and then taste when you're ready.
Brings out like a warmth from it. And with a couple drops of water, it's I wouldn't say it's any less smooth than it was before, but it definitely opens it up, and you can actually almost get a warmth in your mouth when you have your first sip of it.
Does it bring in any specific flavors?
I'm trying to identify what it is.
I actually taste the oak now.
Yeah, it's going to say
now that the water.
The other thing that I get is like also a little bit on the scent. It's like orange rind.
Okay. Like an orange marmalade type thing, or orange rind, or
yeah, like a marmalade.
Okay. Glenn?
Definitely tasted the oak this time around. It seemed just a little bit spicy this time. Not as much of a burn, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we like this one?
I do.
What do you like about it most, Glenn?
I like the smoothness of it. I like the caramel apple flavor to it.
Rich?
I like it. I don't think it's as strong of a flavor as I normally like in a bourbon.
Okay.
So it's a little, I would say it's more mild in flavor for me.
This is one, I'm not a big bourbon drinker at home, but this is definitely one that I would offer to a guest who is interested in trying a good bourbon. I'd say it's a good starter for somebody who's not familiar maybe with this type of the bourbon. And it's so smooth, and a lot of times you get the people who are buying the cheaper bourbons, they're so used to like a little bit of a burn that comes out of a bourbon. You don't get that at all with this.
Keep in mind this is a single barrel, so it's going to vary a little bit in taste from barrel to barrel. So your mileage might vary just a little bit on this one. Show of hands out here in the crowd. What do you guys think? You like it?
It seems mellow. It's mellowed it so much that I would, if I was going to buy this, I would never put water in it.
Yeah.
So we're getting mixed reactions then, I guess. I'm thinking we should have put a microphone out there for you guys. Let's move on to whiskey number 2 now. This is the Old Forester 1897 bottled in bond. And once again, 50% ABV. And this, of course, is a blend of multiple barrels from within the same distilling season. Glenn is blinking.
I think it singed my nose hairs a little bit.
Okay. A little strong there on the aroma?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. A little sweeter, too, on the aroma.
Rich, what are you getting on the nose?
I think it's a little less of a scent than the other one had. But I don't know. Maybe it's because I burned a few hairs on the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the guys in the crowd are now having their own discussion and internal debate here. All it took was one whiskey to loosen them up a little bit and get them talking over there. Go ahead and taste this one, guys. Let's see what you think. I'm seeing a few smiles around the room. Some nodding and bobbing of heads here a little bit. Questions? Questions about this one, or is it... What are you getting, guys?
I think I actually just heard it out there. I was going to say it's a little spicier on the without the water than the other one was.
It's peppier.
A little more spice to this. A touch of cinnamon or nutmeg type of spice in the back, and maybe even a little pepper almost to it.
I tell you, it's like it has a strong finish with a peppery taste to it. And it finishes harder on the tongue than the first one did. It's like it goes down smooth, and then you feel a bite at the end. And it's like I get equated to a cigar with a peppery taste.
Okay. So you can definitely taste the differences between the two then.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
most definitely.
Glenn, what are you getting?
I definitely get that peppery taste at the end. Not really a big fan of this one. A little too spicy.
Okay, let's see what water does to it. See if that changes opinions a little bit. I want to thank Peter Grasso, the leader of the Monmouth Whisky Club, for inviting us to do the tasting panel here tonight and for making sure that we had proper eyedroppers to do the water adding and all that, and also to thank the folks here at the Fireside Inn for pouring generous samples for everybody to taste. So, what are you getting on the flavor for this one with water?
The water
And the
definitely smooths it out for me. It doesn't seem as spicy or as harsh. Definitely much more mellow.
There is still a little bit of a burn, though, even after with the water. That I actually it opens up in your mouth, so you're getting in my mouth. I'm getting the. I can feel as it hits the tongue, it's kind of spreading throughout the whole mouth that I didn't get with the first one.
Yeah, there's more of an evaporation.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's still peppery. I mean, I think I put like 3 drops in. So it's still peppery to me. But I get what Mike said. It's kind of, you taste it all over the tongue, where when you were without the water, it felt very concise, like in one spot.
Okay. Does the water improve it in general?
I think it does.
Yeah, I would say this one's better with water.
I'd say it changes it. I don't know if it improves it. It definitely changes it. It's that odd thing. It moves the way it hits you when you taste it now. It's not that I really get a major change, but I like it more or less with the water. But I definitely see that it's like having 2 different whiskeys at the same time.
Okay, thoughts out in the crowd out here. What do you guys think? Anybody have any thoughts to share? Without the water, it was almost bland. Okay, but with the water, it was better?
Yeah, I thought that the water brought out but I wasn't tasting the peppery taste that they were getting when we tasted it at first. I agree. It was very bland to me.
It was almost like we were drinking different things.
Okay.
Right.
But since we added the water to it, it definitely felt the bill.
Okay, let's go on to our third whiskey. This is the Old Granddad Bottled. Of course, Old Granddad is one of those legacy bourbon brands that's been around for decades and decades. And the bonded version, you have to look for it because it's still on the bottom shelf at a lot of liquor stores. But this one's a real bargain. I think you can get this one for under $25 a bottle. And if you like this one, if you like bottled and bonded bourbons, that's a real buy at that price.
I will say, when I saw the name, it's nostalgia. It's been 30 years since I've tasted Old Granddad, at least 30 years. And this is something I always remember as a kid in my parents' liquor cabinet. So I was looking forward to trying to see how it is nowadays.
I was afraid you were going to say as a kid you were drinking this. And
Well, I guess technically you can say I was the bartender at an early age. So
I think we all were at
Yes.
one point or another.
And my father's thing is, if you're going to make the drink right, have a little taste so you know what it tastes like. So, yes, I did have Old Granddad when, yes.
The statute of limitations has
It's long
expired.
gone, yes.
We're not going to call Child Protective Services on your parents for this one now. And the guys all have their noses deeply into the glass on this one.
I feel like a maple smell to it. I don't know. That's what I get out of it. Like almost like.
There's no wrong answers
Yeah.
here. If you get maple, that's fine.
Yeah,
No, I agree. It is. It's almost like, maple sap, not like maple syrup.
Not
Just a
syrup,
sap of
but
the
like
tree.
a mapley.
Yes. It is definitely a more subtle aroma than the other two were.
It's not strong on the nose at all. I mean, there's not a burn on the nose on this. I mean, you think of that, it's 50, right?
Yeah. Or you've already burned out the nose linings on the first two.
Maybe.
I'm kidding, of course.
Anything's possible.
I think it's got a nice sweet aroma to it that it's like a pleasant tingling sensation on the nose. Definitely sweeter and better than the last one.
Let's go ahead and taste it then and see if that perception continues. Seeing a few smiles out in the crowd on this one. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You were saying
It's very smooth to me. Maybe it's because I got some liquor on the tongue now. Like when you taste
you're primed to the pump a little.
Yeah, you're primed a little bit. But it feels like it's a lot smoother than the other two.
I agree. It's definitely a lot smoother.
And of course, you can go back and retaste those other two before we submit the scores if you'd like to see if they change at all. Glenn, what do you got?
It's definitely my favorite of the three. It's got a nice, pleasant flavor in the mouth, on the tongue. It's got a nice little kick at the end, but overall it's a very pleasant feeling and sensation.
Any specific flavors that come out?
Just a hint of a spice towards the end, I think. I don't know if pepper is really the right word for it.
No, that's fine. Michael is over there sipping this with a big smile on his face.
I guess it's nostalgia, but it's also I'd say I got like a green apple.
Okay.
I was just thinking apple. It's so weird that you said that.
Unfortunately, Rich, you and I agreed too many times.
Yeah, maybe we've been drinking too much.
It's that kind of acetone, the green apple, the tartness,
Right.
that little green apple acetone
Right.
note.
But it's compared to the other, this is the subtlest of the three, without a question. And it's where I said before with the McKenna that would be a good starter for somebody. This might actually be a better starter because it's going to slowly introduce you to any of the flavors that come out of it.
Well, go ahead and add some water to this one, too. This, of course, is our final whiskey of the three, and after this is done, we'll take a short break, give the guys a chance to go back and recalibrate their scores after maybe going back and retasting the other two, and see if a little bit of air and time in the glass improves things a bit. So how is it with water?
I don't taste a big difference with the water on this one for whatever reason. I put 4 drops.
A very generous amount.
Yep.
If anything, there's a little bit different maybe in the mouthfeel, a little more syrupy, a little more viscous when it hits the tongue. But I agree. I don't get a big flavor change.
Glenn?
I put in 3 drops of water. It definitely mellowed it out quite a bit. It's a little smoother. I think it lost a hint of flavor to it, though. I'm tasting a bit of cinnamon now.
Okay. Michael's taking one more taste for our nostalgia's sake.
Yeah, I got hooked on that word earlier, I guess.
Thoughts out here in the room. What do you guys think of this one? You like it? I saw one thumbs down briefly, and then he waved his hands off and said, no, I was kidding. Okay, a syrupy sweetness to it? Okay. Okay. So the water helped it with this one, you think? Okay. Well, that does it. We're going to take a short break right now, and if you guys want to go back for a second here and retry those other first two and see if maybe it's changed your opinions at all, we will get the scores, tabulate them, and come back and pick a winner. You're listening to the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel. In this episode, you're hearing how whiskey clubs can bring whiskey lovers together for fun, friendship, and, of course, tasting great whiskeys. Each episode, we honor a different whiskey club around the world as our Whiskey Club of the Month in partnership with Glencairn Crystal. This time around, we're proud to honor Canada's Edmonton Scotch Club in Edmonton, Alberta. Not just because it's a club with a strong membership of good whiskey lovers, but also because of their work in the community. They started the annual Drams for Fams charity tasting 3 years ago to support their local food bank. And earlier this year, they decided to spread the word and invite other clubs to join them with Drams for Fams tastings during the month of May. Clubs in the U.S. and Canada raised more than $21,000, and I joined the Scotch Test Dummies for a YouTube live tasting as part of the campaign to support a very worthy cause. We'll be sending the Edmonton Scotch Club 24 Whiskey Cast Glencairn glasses to use at their club meetings. If you're part of a whiskey club and would like to be considered for a Club of the Month honors on a future episode of the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel, just send us an email. The address is comments@whiskycast.com and tell us all about your club. If you have a website, we'll also add it to our Whiskey Clubs page in the pub section at whiskycast.com. And who knows, you might just be our next Whiskey Club of the Month. Once again, congratulations to the Edmonton Scotch Club, and thanks to Glencairn Crystal for helping us honor the Whiskey Club of the Month. Welcome back to the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel. The panelists have spoken. We have a verdict. Before I read off the scores, interesting discussion during the break here. What did you guys think of these three whiskeys? And then I'll tell you how the scores came out.
As a non-bourbon drinker, I was pleasantly surprised by all three. And found them to be, more of a drinkable than I've had experience with in a while with bourbons in general. And I've started to taste some bourbons more again. But it was interesting. When we were talking back and forth earlier, it's like I'm the oddball. I went for the one I chose as my favorite. They were all saying was second or third on their list. So it's an interesting situation here. But we did go. I think every one of us went back and changed their scores a little bit after having all three. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm a bourbon drinker, so to me, I enjoyed all three. If I was going out to buy one, I think I'd buy the Old Granddad one, surprisingly, which I haven't picked up a bottle of that in years, but I enjoyed it.
Glenn?
I'm typically a single malt Scotch kind of guy. I have gotten into a few different bourbons in the last year or so. These were a nice change of pace for me. And I agree with Rich. I actually kind of like the Old Granddad.
Well, then you guys are going to like the results because with an average score of 3.6, the Old Granddad Bottled and Bond narrowly beat out the Henry McKenna 10-year-old single barrel by 1/10 of a point, 3.6 average to 3.5. And the Old Forester was a 2.8 average. And just looking here, I think all of you scored, with the exception of Mike, you scored the McKenna the highest.
right.
And I think everybody else either had the Granddad. Rich and Glenn, you both had the Granddad as the highest or tied for the highest on yours. I think, Glenn, you had the Granddad and the McKenna tied. And, Rich, you scored the Granddad above both of them by a full point.
Yep. Yeah, I for some reason, the Granddad had a pleasant taste to me. It wasn't, I thought the first one, which was the McKenna, was good. But the Granddad was just smoother and easier for me.
Glenn?
There's something a little more nostalgic to me with the Old Granddad. It reminded me of college days and pledging my fraternity and drinking a lot of Old Crow, another Kentucky straight bourbon. But it definitely had a nicer flavor to it than the other two.
Michael?
The nostalgia point comes over to the Old Granddad, yes, because like I said, it was something that was always in the house. But I have to say, I mean, it was good, but that McKenna, I think, caught me first, and it might be the Scotch drinker in me. That one reminded me more of a Scotch than the other two did.
So let's show of hands out here in the crowd. Who picked the McKenna as their favorite? Pretty much almost everybody. What about the Old Granddad? 2 people? 3. And did anybody pick the Old Forester? Nope.
Guess how many of the McKenna guys like Scotch?
Okay, how many of the McKenna guys are normally Scotch drinkers? Almost all of you.
There you go.
Okay, that explains it. Did you guys learn anything from this little experience?
Scotch drinkers like McKenna.
I'll have to revisit some of the bourbons that I have, stepped away from.
Glenn, did you learn anything out of this other than that you might like bourbons after all?
Yeah, I definitely want to try some more bourbons and move away from strictly single malts. I think there's a lot to try with these bourbons.
Any final comments from the crowd out here? Given the silence in the room as everybody contemplates their glasses, and they've all returned to being quiet now. Guys, I hope you had fun with this. I've had a great time with this, and thank you for doing this. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
We did.
So, thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to our panelists, Michael Timpanero, Glen Fuchs, and Rich Romano, along with Peter Grasso and the entire membership of the Monmouth Whisky Club and the staff of the Fireside Inn in Marlborough, New Jersey. If you'd like to be a panelist for an upcoming episode of the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel, all you have to do is send us an email. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let us know where you live and if you have Skype on your computer, because that's how we bring our panelists together for virtual online tastings. But if I'm going to be in your area, we might just bring some whiskey lovers together for an in-person tasting. That email address again is comments@whiskycast.com. That's also where you can share your comments about the show, and I hope you'll also share the Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel podcast with your friends, too. You can also help other whiskey lovers discover the show by leaving reviews or ratings wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to join us each week for the latest news and more cask-strength conversation on Whiskey Cast. The Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel is brought to you by the Whiskey Exchange, one of the world's leading online whiskey shops at thewhiskeyexchange.com. The Whiskey Cast Tasting Panel is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2018. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.